Welcome to Politics and Tactics. We have Dave Rhodes on the show today, and it's our hope that he'll be a part of our show every month. Chief Rhodes is someone I know as a quiet, consummate professional who has command presence beyond empty words. He's calm, confident, and competent, and has a common sense way of breaking down complicated issues. Chief Rhodes is just as comfortable supporting a mission from behind the scenes as he is leading out front. Chief Rhodes, it's an honor to have you on with us. And if you'd like to say a few words before we get started, we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Frank. I appreciate you having me. This is a great show. I think a lot of issues that you guys tackle here are the things that nobody wants to talk about. And so it's good that we can bring that to our readers, our subscribers, and to the fire service. Asking the difficult questions. I've been working with fire engineering for almost 25 years now. Like you said, sort of behind the scenes and managing the hands-on training with the FDIC and HOT, and of course, writing for all the different platforms. So look forward to joining you on your show, and we got a lot of work to do to regroup here with the loss of Bobby. No one will ever replace him for sure, and I'm not even going to try. But we are going to carry on the mission, and we're going to build upon all the successes of all the people that have come before us. So look for some great things coming up.
Thanks, Chief. Today for us is a sad day, but the sadness cannot deter our mission of bringing issues of substance to the fire service. As Chief Rhodes said, asking the hard questions. This is the place for cogent debate where it's okay to have a dissenting view. We want to have that debate back and forth for the fire service. You know, Tommy Brennan said, "You don't have to be wrong for me to be right." And I think that was good advice. Bobby Halton recently passed away. He was not only a co-host of this show, but he often filled the role as a producer, recommending guests and issues to be covered. This was the last show Bobby planned with PJ and I. Bobby was a great American, a patriot who provided vision for the entire fire service. And unlike the political class and some in our service, Bobby didn't take polls or seek popularity through consensus. Chief Halton also understood the value of strong surrogates to carry his vision forward. Some of them you're going to hear from today. He led through principles, never sacrificing his own vision or identity. He didn't, and he wouldn't bend his beliefs or language to build a bridge with somebody. As Henry Ford said, if I asked people what they really wanted, they would have said faster horses. Instead, he worked to elevate any individual that wanted a platform to make our service better. He offered grace and guidance. His words, wisdom, will live on through his family and everybody he had an impact on. And now, my monologue. Our first segment is a legal update on vaccine mandates. Lincoln said, "I'm a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts." Why was this wisdom lost? The politicians and so-called experts didn't trust the American public. They demanded that we bow to the altar of science. In some cities and in our great military, public policy was based off assumptions and imperfect information that was far from settled science. They often spoke in absolutes, while in some cases, they were absolutely wrong. We now understand the science they wanted us to follow was political science, where the narrative was force over freedom, where dissenting views would be silenced and cogent debate stifled. We were told by President Biden that the vaccinated could not spread the disease. Even Dr. Fauci stated on CBS's Face the Nation that the vaccinated people will become, and I quote, "a dead end for COVID transmission." These statements established public policy that was based off what they told us was settled science. Only when the science kept evolving, and new information came in, the policies weren't adjusted. At the same time, some information was completely ignored, ranging from the lab leak theory to the benefits of natural immunity. The problem was the policies that were enacted on half-truths and faulty premises were not evolving with new information. This led to disastrous consequences for our children, businesses, military members, and first responders. Currently, as we sit here today, there are still 13 of the biggest 50 cities in America that still have draconian vaccine mandates in place. Now, while there's been a shining light on the military side, the National Defense Authorization Act was just signed into law by President Biden, ending the mandates for the military. However, these legal mechanisms to accomplish this and for the military was attached to a spending bill, meaning this change is only a temporary stay, leaving military members on sand, uncertain of their rights in the near future. We will talk to Bear and his attorney, Nathan Lloyd, today. I'm going to relay a text message Bobby Halton sent to me to introduce me to Bear. In Bobby's own words, G is a brilliant young man, Coast Guard intelligence, and a firefighter. You will enjoy him. We cannot forget that most of these individuals who objected to the vaccines already had COVID-19, and all of them came to work when no vaccines were available. Most disappointing was the I-Chiefs jumped on the bandwagon supporting the mandates, but most disturbing was the failure of the unions to represent their members who were terminated. Terminating an employee is the equivalent of the death penalty in an employment situation, requiring substantial due process. Unfortunately, the International Association of Firefighters sat on their hands and chose to make speeches as New York City firefighters and Seattle firefighters lost their livelihood. We are also honored to have Chad, and I don't want to do any disrespect to his last name, so I'm going to have him say that because we're going to have him on in a second. But he's a lawyer who specializes in constitutional law and criminal law. Chad began his career serving the public as a criminal defense attorney, invoking his inner John Adams, I'm sure, and then a prosecutor. Chad's unique combination of street smarts and book smarts helps keep his opponents off balance. Last year, Chad stepped up and defeated New York State's masking mandates for children that were being harmed. Chad was the only attorney to win those cases, and there was a lot of them. Just a few months ago, Chad defeated New York's vaccine mandate in the lower courts on behalf of 16 amazing sanitation workers. The goal was to strike down the vaccine mandate for everybody. CJ Law is a working class law firm that stands up for working class families. And we're going to start off by Chad. Just introduce your last name a little bit for our listeners. My dyslexia gets me, and sometimes I didn't want to slaughter it. So welcome to Politics and Tactics. It's an honor to have you on the show. And I'm here today, of course, with our other co-host, PJ Norwood, who will be running the second half of the show today. Chad?
Thanks, Frank. It's pronounced Lavalia. And thank you for having me. It's great to be in the company of like-minded people who are fighting the good fight here. Just to give a little segue off of what you were talking about, in New York City, watching what's happening it's horrifying, and watching lawsuit after lawsuit fail was even more horrifying. Firefighters, police, all the public servants that keep the city running were just being thrown under the bus. And so I stepped up and I filed the lawsuit. And as you mentioned, the real goal was to knock out the entire vaccine mandate. So not only is it unconstitutional, but the mayor, the audacity of this guy is just unfathomable. He created a carve-out where only employees working for the public sector had to get vaccinated. I never thought in my lifetime that I would see something like that.
So if you're a basketball player, a professional basketball player, you could come to New York City, perform unvaccinated, interact with people, no issue. But if you're a firefighter, cop, or sanitation worker that came to work every day when we had no answers, just helping the citizens, sorry about your bad luck. Am I correct with that?
100%. 100%. And he has no justification for it. He was asked by the press. He just jumbled his words around. It's pure discrimination against the people we need the most. And yet there's this kind of tolerance for it that is just, it's unacceptable. And it doesn't belong here in America.
Now, to bring understanding to our listeners, because when the New York Post published the story that you won, the rest of the country was celebrating because it said the New York State Supreme Court. So correct me if I'm wrong, New York is backwards compared to everybody else. And when they say the state Supreme Court, they're actually talking about a lower court. So even though you won, the mayor is ignoring the judge's order and you're going on to appeal. Can you explain that? Because that caused a lot of confusion of individuals who, you read the headline, hey, the Supreme Court ruled, we're good. Well, no, the fight continues and these guys still need help. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, you are entirely correct. New York is one of the few states that has it backwards. Our Supreme Court is our lowest trial court. Then we have appellate courts in the middle, and our highest court is called the Court of Appeals. And unfortunately, the Court of Appeals has not handled a single case with these issues. They've purposefully kept it aside. They don't want to make the call. And the call is clear that these are unconstitutional. But yes, the mayor appealed it and or filed an intent to appeal. It hasn't actually put it in writing yet. And so we're fighting it in the appellate division, which I'm just going to be honest, is stacked with political appointees who will just ignore the truth and the law. And it's
politicians in robes? How could that be?
Yeah.
So the leadership lesson in this for politics and tactics is you don't ever want to attach your pride or your ego to a position so that when new information changes, you can't back away from it with your dignity. And that's why we see this doubling down. Unfortunately, the mayor had an opportunity. He still has an opportunity to do the right thing, to say, hey, I did the best, but the court overruled me, and just institute it. But the mayor himself and his administration is making a choice to appeal this. They could enact that lower court ruling. I'm not a lawyer, Chad. I just play one on TV. So please kind of enlighten us on that.
Well, you nailed it at every point. Yeah, that's exactly right. We gave him multiple opportunities to say, all right, look, so the science is changing, or I got it wrong, or he could have fallen on his sword in a very graceful way. But instead of falling on his sword, he's picking it up and still swinging it. And I'm going to tell you something. I will not live in a country where we have tyrants. I will not be commanded, and especially with our public employees. So I'm going to sue him personally. And we're just waiting to get funds and donations so I can sue him personally in federal court. I will take his house. I will take his job. I will take everything that he has for discriminating against these 16 wonderful people and every firefighter, police officer, and public employee, because that's what this is, pure discrimination. There's no rhyme, reason, or justification for it.
Chad, in our SCOTUS case, one of the things that got a lot of notice is we put a lien on the mayor's house, and it got people paying attention, and it is something that could possibly be done. The leadership lesson here too, I want to quote a modern day philosopher, Anthony Avillo, who said something along, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he said something along that ego and emotion should never occupy the same space as leadership and rank. And that's one of the things that Bobby Halton did, is he always put the mission first. And, we're sorry for him today. Let's move to, and Chad, please stay on, because we want to keep going with this. Is there a website if anybody wants to help out your cause, or where they can get direct information from you as this case gets updated on the appeal?
Yes, they can go to cjlawny.com.
Terrific. And we'll have Peter, if you could send us the link. I'll have Peter put it up underneath this show. Peter's on the back end doing a great job for us. Please stay on, because Chief Rhodes, you had a question for Chad?
Now, I just wanted to say it is awfully disheartening that common sense in some of these issues falls victim of politics. And me being a union president for 8 years, like I was, and all in the delicate political dance that you do, one of your strategies is to always try not to back the person you're up against into a corner and give them a back door out, and to let them leave gracefully, or leave their issue or change their mind without hammering them. And you can only open that door so many times before you have to just get the hammer out and just fight like crazy. But kudos to giving everybody a way out and saving face. But if they don't take it, then you just have to move on through the process.
Very, very well said. And always try to give the person who's making the decision a way out to save face and get the job done. Keep the mission first and try to keep the personal politics out of it. But sometimes if you don't make an issue of something, you're not an issue, and you got to take it head on. So Chad, kudos to you. I'm going to introduce Mr. Lloyd, and Mr. Lloyd is another attorney. Lawyers are the only profession that are wrong 50% of the time and still get paid. Go into any courtroom and you'll find that out. Just want to say that there. Firefighters and chiefs, we don't have that luxury. We got to get it right based off imperfect information. I'm going to read from a text because Bear just sent this to me like 30 seconds before the show. Former flight commander of an A-10 fighter jet test engineer for the U.S. Air Force. Currently a major in the U.S. Air Force Reserves, where he frequently advises high-level government officials as a nuclear proliferation analyst. Mr. Lloyd received his JD from Georgetown University Law and an MS in nuclear engineering from the Air Force Institute of Technology. I could just break this down. Lloyd's a very smart guy. Lloyd, I'm going to just stop at that. This just goes on and on and on. Your resume is very, very impressive, and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
Did I get it right on the defense authorization bill? Is it just a temporary legal mechanism that will expire and they're on sand, or frame what's going on with the military for us?
I actually took a note of your on sand comment because I think it's very apt. The NDAA, when we heard that there was negotiations happening to rescind the vaccine mandate for the military, I confess I got very excited. I thought that this might be a very clear off-ramp. But in the end, it gave us a temporary relief, but we're not quite there yet. There's a lot of limitations. First, the most glaring omission is that it doesn't even apply to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is under DHS, not the DoD, but the NDAA only requires rescission of the DoD's mandate. So that's a huge oversight. And we're still fighting in court for a Coast Guard injunction. All 5 DoD services currently have injunctions restraining them, but the Coast Guard is still left unprotected right now. The other limitation is that by the NDAA rescinding the mandate, the military commanders still believe that the order was legal and lawful in the first place, which then leads to the conclusion that they can discharge people for disobeying a lawful order. So even though vaccine objectors are now in the clear to continue serving, they still have derogatory marks on their records. And so we're seeing people being denied reenlistment, so they're being forced out anyway, denied promotions, so they're being forced out anyway. And it's a pretextual way to get out these principled objectors who, frankly, in my opinion, are the exact people that you want in leadership positions. You want those people in the military because they're willing to lay down their lives and their careers for something principled that matters.
Wow. Now, what's the status of the injunction? Do you have a scheduled hearing, or?
We have been fully briefed since October. So right now we're still just waiting on the judge to issue a decision. In the meantime, we've been able to get temporary relief for any Coast Guard service members who come to us. We have a negotiation process with the Department of Justice and the Coast Guard to help them get delayed at least until the Coast Guard rescinds their policy. The Coast Guard has signaled that they intend to follow the DoD's lead on this issue, which is a good sign. We're grateful for that. But as I said, it's not a fulsome relief. So we have stopgap measures until the judge weighs in, and we're obviously praying that he goes the right way, there's good precedent. As I said, all 5 DoD services have some form of injunction. Most of them have a class-wide injunction. And so there's really no reason to expect something to happen differently from the Coast Guard.
I just want to remind anybody listening today that if they have a question, they can do #FE Talk on Twitter, and we'll try to get to your question. Nathan, what is the court of jurisdiction for the appeal?
So we are currently in the Northern District of Texas. It's a federal district court. The other judges in that same court have already issued injunctions. In fact, one is for the Navy, one is for some Army service members. We've had other injunctions from other law firms out of Florida and one out of Ohio, and we're seeing great success with these. There have been a few cases didn't go our way, but those were mostly for various procedural or jurisdictional issues. But once the courts get to the merits of this issue, and they start thinking about and talking about how the vaccine doesn't stop transmission, the vaccine doesn't stop serious illness for healthy, fit service members. When they get to the actual science and they consider what is going on, they all consistently have come to the realization this makes no sense. There's no reason to terminate somebody's career, to put their career in a death penalty mode, as somebody said earlier, when there's really no benefit for this. As you said, there's a pride attached to the policy, and that seems to be really the only reason why they're persisting in this.
And now, Lloyd, does this affect reservists in the Coast Guard, the National Guard, as well as the military in general? Because a lot of firefighters are either members of the National Guard, members of the Coast Guard Reserve. It affects everybody, blanket across the board?
So we have been able to get help for Coast Guard reservists. In fact, there was a group of Coast Guard reservists, and I'm going to say the term because I'm assuming a lot of people are familiar with it. They were ready to go to the ISL, so the inactive service list, which is inactive reserve. You don't get pay, you don't get TRICARE, you don't get all the kinds of benefits. They were slated to go to the ISL on September 30th. We had enough of those people come forward to us that we were able to get a group of about 100 people extended first to December 1st, and then to December 15th, and now January 15th. So we've been able to extend those careers and help those people stay in. If we weren't there, they would have been kicked to the ISL, they would have been discharged, and even this NDAA and change in policy would not have helped them. So we're grateful that we were able to provide that assistance, and it does apply to Coast Guard reservists, as long as we know who they are. If somebody needs help, they need to come to us, and we can get them extended until the Coast Guard stops its policy.
Now, the interesting thing, and one of the reasons why I'm hopeful that you're going to win your injunction, and this is for our listeners, and correct me if I'm wrong, but injunctions are hard fought and not easily won. However, to win an injunction in federal or state court for that matter, you have to prove that you're likely to prevail on the merits of the case without a fully developed case record. A lot of times depositions aren't taken, things of that nature. And with them winning 4 injunctions for the other branches, that puts you in a position of strength. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And it's a very compelling point. There's no reason why the Coast Guard's vaccine mandate is in substance any different than the rest of the DoD mandates. The facts are the same, the vaccines were the same, the case incidence rates were the same. And when we really get down to the merits and look at, we're challenging this under RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, is the primary route. And in order to violate somebody's free exercise rights, the federal government must show that its policy is the least restrictive means of achieving a compelling interest. And when the courts get to this least restrictive means of compelling interest, they've consistently found that there are other ways to stop the spread of COVID. And there's no compelling interest in a particular person getting the vaccine. The compelling interest may be to halt the spread of COVID throughout the entire military as a whole. But when you look at a granular level, as the law requires, when you look at a particular person, you just can't make that case. There's other ways to help them prevent COVID, masking, social distancing, telework, all kinds of things that are preferable and should be opted for rather than discharging them for failing to vaccinate.
Now, Chad, I want to go back to you for a second, because Dave and I understand quite well, even when we agree or disagree with somebody when we were union president, we had a right to represent the process. And one of the things that I'm sure, I don't want to speak for him, that I'm sure that he used was that, this is arbitrary and capricious, and you're not treating similar situated employees the same way. It's kind of like what we were all taught about the red hot stove. Everybody knows what the rules are. As you touch it, you get burned equally. And what I see happening in New York is the decision by the administration was definitely arbitrary and capricious. Same thing with Seattle. But also similar situated employees were being treated differently by the same administration. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Are you sure you're not a lawyer? Because you know just as much as or more than many lawyers I know. So
I appreciate that.
But again, yeah, you nailed it. It is arbitrary and capricious, and as with all things in politics, some people were given preferential treatment over others within the same units or garages. And just to touch on the religious aspects, all my clients and lots of people sought religious exemptions, and the city granted some, denied others. No rhyme or reason. They just arbitrarily picked numbers. It's almost like they pick numbers out of a hat. And that's, again, just another travesty, another example of a government that's really just sticking by the policy just for the sake of their own pride while harming these individuals significantly.
Very well said. Nathan, can you explain who took on this lawsuit? Like, who are you representing? I believe it's the Thomas More Foundation. If you could tell our viewers just a little bit about the Thomas More Foundation.
Yes, so I work with the Thomas More Society. It's a law firm out of Chicago that specializes in religious liberty interests. We are named after our namesake is St. Thomas More, who was a statesman and politician, very high ranking in the administration of King Henry VIII. And he gave it all up and was eventually killed for standing up for his religious liberty against the king. And he's a great model for, I think, everybody fighting against this on religious principles, because as he was being killed, his statement was, "I remain the king's good servant, but God's first." I think everybody here would agree, we are gladly in service of our country. We love our country, but we have an obligation to follow our conscience and obey God's law. So as I said, if somebody needs help with this, they can go to our website, thomasmoresociety.org. We have an intake form, which will inevitably come to me, and I can reach out and try to see what we can do to help people stay in the Coast Guard as long as we can.
Well, we appreciate your service, and thank you for your personal service to the nation as well. And thanks to the Thomas More Society. And I apologize for calling them a foundation, but Chad, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, because I've have a couple Seattle firefighters texting me right now that say they want to talk to Chad. So can you give them your website again? And then we're going to move to our next segment.
Sure. It's cjlawny.com. And if they go on to the website later on, they can just go to a consult, click the consult link, fill out the form, and they'll come right to me. And I'll do what I can to help them out.
Well, honored to have both of you individuals on today. Text me the website link and I'll have Peter put it up underneath this show, which we commonly do. Honored to have both of you on. Keep up the fight. We need people who are willing to stand up and ask the hard questions. And now I'm going to turn the show over to PJ Norwood, who's going to kind of do a round robin and pay tribute to, our mentor and boss, Bobby Halton. PJ.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Frank. And thank to our previous guests. They did a great job outlining a position that we know Chief Halton was in great support of, and him setting the stage for this show today was very important to both of us. So today we want to take some time to honor and remember Chief Halton. Well, there's a lot of sadness and grief for all of us, as well as all our listeners today. We want to honor him the way he would want us to honor him. He wouldn't want us to be sad. He wouldn't want us to drown ourselves in emotions. He would definitely want us to celebrate, discuss the fun, enjoyable times and lessons that he taught all of us. We'll have a few guests joining us today to share their thoughts and stories. But first, we'd like to send our thoughts and prayers to North Haven, Connecticut Fire Department. North Haven, Connecticut is both a mutual aid department to Frank's department and mine, and they suffered a line of duty death this week to a 22-year veteran of their department. A difficult time of year for line of duty death to a member in any department, but being a mutual aid agency to both Franks and I, it was extremely important that we send our prayers and our thoughts to them. Next up, I'm extremely honored to read a statement by the governor of Indiana that was provided to Frank and I in regards to the loss of Chief Halton. The loss to FDIC and firefighters in Indiana and around the country is immeasurable. Bobby was an educator, a motivator, and an inspirational leader to those in the fire service and so far beyond. I always looked forward to being around him and hearing him speak at the annual FDIC conference, as his uplifting words of encouragement impacted my life greatly. There will never be another like Bobby. Janet and I send our deepest condolences to his family. Governor Eric J. Holcomb. We thank the governor for support of FDIC and providing this statement today. If you knew the chief, you were friends with the chief. If you knew the chief, you have a story about him. If you knew the chief, there was not a conversation that he would not teach you something. He touched all of us. For me, he made me a better person every time I had the opportunity to listen or talk with him. There'll never be another Chief Halton. However, the fire service must forge on. I have the privilege today to pass the microphone to many individuals who I consider friends and mentors to offer their thoughts on Chief Halton. I appreciate all of them joining us today. I'm going to go around the room in no specific order, pretty much just how I see you on the screen, because I do know that Chief Halton was extremely important to each and every one of you. And Frank and I truly appreciate you joining us today to honor and remember him. And I know, looking at this screen of faces, we're going to have a few good laughs. So first, I'm going to start with Chief David Rhodes. Chief.
Thanks, PJ. So yeah, my relationship with Bobby goes back all the way to 2000, and Bill Manning was the editor of Fire Engineering, and Matt Mosley and I were asked to do the keynote at FDIC that year in April, and so it was a little different setting back then. We actually had like an hour for the keynote instead of the 20 minutes or so we go now. So we had a full video production. We did our whole spiel about the tower crane rescue that Matt did. And of course, I was union president then. So we talked about the issues that came up. And so right as I walked off stage from that, which, obviously there's only one person that gets to do that a year. And it's just an exhilarating experience to be there doing the keynote on Wednesday. And so walk backstage towards the green room. I've been pounding water up on stage to keep from getting the dry mouth as we're talking, and Matt and I are tossing it back and forth. So I had to go to the bathroom really bad. So I pull up in that bathroom back in the hallway for anybody who's been backstage there. And the guy that kind of saddles up next to me at the urinal is Bobby Halton. Never met him before, never seen him. So he kind of like does the guy etiquette, look straight ahead and start talking. And he says, young man, that was outstanding. He said, you got fire chiefs shaking in their boots all over this country. He said, that was just absolutely outstanding. And I was like, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And all. So we finished up there, went and washed our hands. Then we shook hands. And he's like, I'm Bobby Halton from the Albuquerque Fire Department. And the first thing he asked me was, he said, hey, I noticed the AFDs on your trucks in Atlanta, because I was working in Atlanta. And he said, I've been trying to find somebody to do gold leaf on the Albuquerque Fire Department trucks. And he said, I like the way you guys have the letters. He says, any way you can get me the contact for your gold leaf guy. And so I did, and emailed him, like 2 or 3 weeks later. And that just started a long relationship. A few years later, he became the editor after Bill Manning left. I was already doing managing the hot logistics and being a hot coordinator. And so I have probably talked to the man, talked or text 2 or 3 times a week since then. And then Bobby and Eric Slett brought me on board full time after I retired. So I started with fire engineering August 1st, and I have probably talked to Bobby 4 or 5 times a day, weekends included, since then. And you guys nailed it. He loved the fire service. He loved history. He loved America. And he wasn't always right. He had some people that didn't like him for decisions he made and all. And we didn't agree on every single thing or every tactic or whatever, but you're not supposed to. You're just supposed to believe in the mission, and you're supposed to be dedicated to that mission and work for the common good. And so when anybody would really be critical to him in front of me, I would always bring up the famous man in the arena, because it is easy to be critical of somebody who's actually in the arena doing it and having to make decisions versus sitting in the recliner and nitpicking somebody else to death. So he was a great friend, a great mentor, and no one can replace him. I don't think anybody's going to try, but definitely the way we honor Bobby is not so much we don't have to dedicate everything to him. We don't have to, wear his name everywhere we go. But what we have to do is do a great job. We have to be invested in the mission, be invested in training the fire service. And that's the way you honor the legacy of Bobby Halton, is you continue the mission.
Well said, Chief. I appreciate that. And I'm going to skip ahead here to Eddie Buchanan, because he looks like he's in a interesting predicament. First, we want to check in, make sure he's okay, and hopefully this isn't just a bad Zoom backdrop. Chief, you doing okay? And you're on mute.
He's in a hospital bed. Maybe he can't unmute.
Yeah, we'll give him a chance to unmute himself if he could. Peter, can you unmute him for us?
All right, we'll come back to Eddie, unless he knows sign language.
Wait, he just said 1 minute. Peter cannot unmute him. We'll give him one quick second. If not, we'll move forward. We'll come back to him.
Tap on the drums 3 times.
There he is. You're on, Eddie.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so having some issues with some kidney stones, it seems like, but you guys were saying, hey man, take care of yourself. But I know what Bobby did. I've seen Bobby. I ain't missing this for the world, man. I'll be all right. Waiting on a CT scan. I got, I'm good. So no, I just wanted to, I think my best Bobby story that I've been wanting to share with folks. It's actually back when he was sick. We had the 5K, right? We have the run every, I think it's Thursday. They do it at FDIC, and he was really sick that particular year. And Jack came to me before the race and says, hey, none of us are really in a position to be able to run, and he wants to run. Would you tag along with Bobby and make sure he's okay? And I said, sure, I'll be happy to. We're glad to stick with you, make sure it's all good for the run. So, I was in pretty good shape in those days. Thought it would be easy enough, right? So, he was pretty sick. We take off on this thing. We start easy. Everything's going fine. Then he starts to speed up. Then I'm starting to breathe hard. And by the time we finally make the U-turn and come back, it's about all I can do to keep up with this guy. We get back to the thing. I keep up with him, but I'm like hands on my knees about to die, breathing, about ready to throw up. And he's like, he didn't do anything. And he's sick. I mean, it was amazing. He was just such an incredible character. And I thought, I'm going to be embarrassed if I can't keep up with this guy who's supposed to be the one who's not feeling well. But man, I've known Bobby, I don't know, probably 20 something years. The first time I sat down with him after he became the editor of fire engineering was a discussion about bringing the ISFSI back to FDIC. That was his idea. That was his baby. He brought it to us. And we have, of course, I fell over myself trying to make that happen with him. And he's just been such a strong ally for the fire service and such a great example, such a great mentor, just tremendous leadership. And there's no way I'm missing this call if I have a couple of minutes to say something good about Bobby. I mean, I just love the guy that, I don't know what else to say. I won't take up too much of the time, and the doc might come in here in a second. So I appreciate you putting me on there quick there, PJ and Frank.
Well, thanks for joining us. If you could hang out, feel free. We'd love to get your comments in about 20 or 30 minutes once the pain meds kick in a little bit more.
Yeah, right.
PJ, you might want to clarify that hanging out. He is in a hospital gown.
Yeah, we'll leave that to the eyes of the imagination here. I don't want him to tilt his camera at all.
We'll keep it tilted up.
Yeah. Chief Avillo, thanks for joining us from Jersey. And he's muted as well.
There we go.
There he goes.
All right, I'm good. You hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Hey, listen, man, thank you for having me on, PJ and Frank, and everybody in this room I'm looking at, man. I love all you guys, and we're all coming from the same place. We've all been influenced by and befriended by and honored by and made fun of and everything else dealing with Bobby, and as the days have gone by, you think about him and you think, man, it's the FDIC is going to be, kind of empty this year with 30,000 people, but no Bobby Halton, but just the fact that we're all there and he's a part of us now, it's I think it's going to make it a little bit better for everybody. He was I first met him when he was working with Ted Nee, and we had gotten a sit down in the airport and on the way out of the FDIC, and he said to me, "Hey man, we used the shit out of your book out here, and I was like, what do you guys got nothing but tumbleweeds out there in Albuquerque?" He's like, "Yeah, but sometimes the tumbleweeds roll into buildings, so we got off to a good head start, and he wound up, I guess, because some people told him about my obsession with, or maybe it's not an obsession, but the chin strap issue, and so he wrote an article in the editorial called Brown M&Ms, and it was all about basically details and listening to details and working on details, and it was really good. I have it framed. It's in my office at the academy. But he, my Brown M&M that Bobby always identified was the fact that I can't tie a tie. I could tie like every knot known to man, and Ed Flood, who was my mentor before, Bobby hooked onto that. He'd always be fixing my tie, and he taught me all the knots. And Bobby came in, and before my keynote and before just about everything I've ever done where I've had a tie on, he would have to stop what he was doing, no matter who he was talking to, come right over to me and fix my tie. He did it actually when we did the FDIC in, I guess it was last summer or 2 summers before, when with the COVID, we had that summer conference, and he walked into my room, and it was 70, 80 people in there, and he stopped the class to come up and fix my tie. And he was that was Bobby, that was Bobby, and everybody's got the stories about him, and he will be missed. And he was one of those guys that could like peg you, and he knew what you were all about, almost all the time. Like we did something one time where a guy was doing a keynote, and we had him come to the conference center for I know Frank was involved in that, for a photo opportunity, and there was no photo opportunity, but we said, put your Class A's on, come to the conference center at 3:00. And we had the girls at the hotel actually call him. So he showed up with his Class A's, and he's looking around, and there's no picture session. There's nothing going on. And he
It was
goes
like
in,
from Goodfellas.
it was, he didn't stand on plastic though. But he went in and he started to ask Diane about it. Now Diane doesn't know anything about it, and Diane is like sort of like now starting to like go on a bit of a witch hunt. And Bobby, of course, saw New Jersey written all over this thing. He came in, he grabbed me and Jimmy Weiss, and he goes, "This thing has you guys written all over it. What do you know about it? You better straighten this out, because now Diane's involved in this. And when she gets pissed, he goes, I'm not getting in her way." So it was it was a pretty good story. And again, listen, everybody's got great stories about Bobby, and he's just gonna be missed. But you know what? You feel him. You feel his presence when you talk about him, and that's all good things. And God bless him, and God bless all you guys for keeping his spirit alive. Thank you, boys.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. Mr. Castros, I made sure in my last couple weeks off from work, I started growing the goatee because I have aspirations of being Anthony Castros one day. So, Chief, thanks for joining us.
Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
You better get a nose job and you add about 2 inches that way. And then you can look like me, not the beard. The beard's not going to do it. Yeah, I don't know where to start, you guys. First thing I want to do is thank you, Frank and PJ, for the opportunity to share some memories about our dear friend and to do it with such amazing brothers. This is healing. I don't know about you guys, but this last week sucked between Christmas and the typical holiday stuff and all that going on, and then to find out Bobby passed, it sucked. But like you said, we're not here to lament. We're here to celebrate our dear friend and what a person he was. And David, you talked about your keynote with Matt. I was there for that. I remember that the way you guys came down the steps on either side, and I remember the video of the crane rescue. I was like, oh my God, what is this? This is like larger than life. This whole experience is insane. But I also remember that you were logistics, in the rear with the gear. And that was what I think that's the spirit of who Bobby was. He was a servant leader. He was one of those guys who could be out in front on stage and just thunderously impassioned with just spit coming out of his face. And I called it the splash zone. The first three rows of FDIC, when he's just fire and brimstone, you're in the splash zone. And you just, and every one of us that had the privilege and honor of doing the keynote after him, we're like, really? That's how you set us up? Thanks, you jerk. So, but that was who Bobby was. He was a servant leader. And the thing that I remember, I met him, I think it was in 2006 at a baggers meeting when Brunacini used to have the baggers meetings. And I didn't know him. I had done a lot of FDIC stuff in Sacramento, FDIC West, when it was out there for a while, and the Manning era. And then I meet this Bobby Halton guy. He's the new editor-in-chief, and we hit it off right away because I don't know. If you look at the screen, I think I'm the only West Coast guy on this whole screen. And I've always related better to East Coast guys. I'm an East Coaster at heart. When people meet me, they always think I'm from the East Coast because the way I talk. And whenever I meet East Coast guys, they say, "Where'd you grow up?" In Brooklyn. I said, "No, I wish I did." But that was the thing about Bobby. We hit it off right away, even though I was from California. And what I loved about him is, when you talk to him, I don't know, it's hard to put into words. You would have this, like, for example, he came out to Oklahoma City. We did a command class, called the Chaos Train the Trainer for Oklahoma City Fire in March. And he came out for the whole thing. Took time out of his schedule, drove out there, and just spent the whole time with us, dinner, breakfast, classroom time, out in the field. And what I loved was he was both complimentary and supportive, but also insightful and giving us little bits and pieces that he wanted to see added to the training. He's like, that's really good, but did you think of this? Oh, I like what you guys are doing there, but did you think of that? I think every conversation with Bobby, you felt like you were always getting something from him without him even trying. He wasn't even trying, and he would drip wisdom in your direction. But he also had a sense where he made you feel like he actually learned something from you. I don't know if you guys felt that, but there was like that mutual edification feeling with him that was so amazing. I never felt like he was preaching at me. He was preaching at the audience and stuff, but when you got one-on-one with him, he was like as gentle as a choir boy. And you could have these intimate conversations where you felt like it was truly a two-way conversation. And somehow you felt like you gave him some little nugget. As much as he gave you a boulder of gold, you still gave him a little nugget, and that made you feel special. And that's one of the things I think I love most about him. He used to call me falafel head. I've never eaten a falafel in my life. I'm Greek. I eat feta cheese, but I don't eat falafels. But who cares? When Bobby Halton has a nickname for you, you go with it. It's the greatest thing in the world. And I just want to close with the fact that he was kind of a dichotomy, in my opinion. He was this, I call a sinner and saint kind of thing. He was, he would cuss out those who would try and tarnish our profession and who didn't appreciate it and who didn't hold it as dearly as he did. But at the same time, he would die for you and die for anybody who did. He didn't care where you came from. I think the guy said it last week that, all he cared about was that you were passionate about the job. And what I'm thankful and what brings me a lot of comfort is his faith. I know he's in heaven. I know he's sitting with Jesus right now. I don't know if he's trying to take command or not, but he's definitely, or if he's trying to take the main stage or do the keynote or whatever up there, but he's definitely in a place where I think Mike Galliano said it really well, where it's sad for us, but he wouldn't change where he is right now. And the way he passed was so appropriate, just always fighting, always moving forward, never stopping, tireless, passionate. And that's the legacy that I think is going to hopefully touch all of us. So thanks for today, you guys.
Thank you. Very, very well said. For any other guests that are on, if you have a cutoff time that you need to leave by, just drop it into the chat. I'm going to jump to our good friend Frank Ricci because he has to jump off here in a couple minutes for a previous commitments. So Frank, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. First of all, can you hear me okay, PJ?
I can't hear you, but your video is off, which is fine, but we can't hear you okay.
Yeah. Okay, I apologize for the video. I'm in Marlboro, New Jersey, up in a barn area, and my kids are having a lesson right now. I have no cell service up here. I apologize, but I did not want to miss this. I have to tell you a couple of things, and one is how I met Bobby. I had proposed an idea for a book before I had even ever spoken at FDIC. I'd never met Bobby. I proposed an idea for a book, and Fire Engineering Books and Videos, they liked the idea. It was Fire Ground Operational Guides. They liked the idea, and I was told, hey, you know what? We want to go with this, and they were going to send a contract, but the contract never came. But I figured I'm just going to get this thing done. I know it's going to come. They're telling me it's going to come, but it never came. And I thought, well, maybe they don't want the book. And then I was getting some unreturned calls, and I thought maybe this is not going to happen. But let me finish this anyway. Who would we want to write a forward? And I was co-authoring this with Mike Turpak. Bobby Halton would be the perfect guy to write a forward, but I don't know Bobby. So how would that sound? Hey, you don't know me. I never spoke at the conference. Would you write a forward for my book? And I thought he's going to laugh me off the phone, but he was so generous. He read the book. He said, I think we need this book. He wrote an amazing forward. As soon as the forward was sent to Fire Engineering Books and Videos, we received the contract within an hour. His forward literally was more powerful than the book, and that's Bobby Halton. And Frank and all you guys are kind of touching on it. His passion for the fire service is unmatched, and you can't help but to get passionate about it when you're talking to him. But here's the thing, and I don't know if anybody felt this way, when I would speak to Bobby, I always felt incredibly uneducated. I thought, man, he's going into politics, he's going into history, he's going into faith, but he's so well read. And this sounds weird for a guy that had written 10 books, but he was using words I never even knew existed. I felt like I had to have a conversation with him with a dictionary next to me, because I'm thinking, oh, but here's what I love about him. He never made you feel less educated. And that's what Anthony just talked about. He never made you feel like you were something less than what you were. He was a guy, and I like to say it this way, people will rise or fall to meet your level of expectation.
Frank didn't meet our expectations. He just dropped off.
Yeah, we got most of that, Frank, but you cut off. We appreciate you joining us today. If you could still hear us.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Do you still have? I know I lost you.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out, Frank. We got most of that. We appreciate your words today. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll have more shows. And
I apologize about that. I just want to say, man, I love Bobby. Thank you for having me on. I'm sorry that I'm in a bad spot right now for service.
That's okay. Thanks for joining us and giving us a little perspective. We really appreciate it today. Thank you. How about next in line here on the screen is our good friend Glenn Corbett. Glenn?
Hey, thanks, PJ, and thanks, Frank, for having us on today to honor Bobby. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when I first met Bobby. It was in the 90s, at the show, I'm sure, and he sort of just blended in back then, and sort of over time sort of emerged as this unique individual. I think everybody on this call would agree that there's not one person we know in the fire service had much energy that he did. I mean, just look at every one of us knows how much travel he did to just about every corner of this country, every fire department, big and small, rural, volunteer paid. He was all over, literally all over the map, engaging with, firefighters and speaking their language and, talking to them and finding out what's going on and stuff. The other thing, the word friendship here, Diane and I use this acronym FOB. He's a friend of Bobby's, okay? Because he literally had thousands of people across this country thinking that they were the center of everything. And he was just that kind of person. He was just a genuine individual who just connected with so many people across this country that it is an enormous loss. A lot of fellows and folks don't know how much work is involved in that job as editor. We see the show, we see him give his fire and brimstone, presentation every year. We see all that kind of stuff, but there's so many other moving parts behind the scene, and he was able to manage all that along with the folks at the magazine and at the show. He was a dedicated individual that I've really never met somebody like that again with the amount of energy. One funny story, I was with him a couple weeks ago. He did a hump day hangout with ISFSI. He happened to be in the new office in Rochelle Park, and he and I did a hump day hangout with them over a variety of issues. And as somebody mentioned earlier, he was so, said such sort of connection and in-depth knowledge about a variety of subjects and stuff. We ended up talking about recruiting retention and got into all sorts of things. And, it was a really, it was one of those moments, at least that I look back on. It was really enjoyable few hours with Bobby, just sort of talking with the ISFSI folks on Zoom, and then just he and I talking about things in general about the magazine and what have you. And, he had asked me a question and I texted him, and as he always did, he sends me back a photograph of him sitting in an airplane seat, like with this goofy look on his face and stuff. And he says to me, do me a favor, answer this email that I just sent to you. So I look at the email, and what is it? It's from this person. Again, this is another thing about being editor of fire engineering. You get emails and letters from every corner of the planet, basically, people about this and that and whatever. You're not gonna believe this. This one was from some individual who I didn't even know these people existed. Apparently, they're adult Lego builders. Okay, Lego block builders. They're adults. Okay, it's like it must be like a cult or something that they build all sorts of things. And this guy was particularly interested in wanting to know what a war wagon is in terms of the fire service. So Bobby threw this at me. Of course, I copied him on the response, and I told the guy, I go, look, the war wagon is not a thing. It's a description of condition in my mind. It's something that goes back, 100 years ago, World War I. And in terms of the fire service, we think of it as, as a beat up piece of apparatus that's seen too much duty at fire scenes, during the war years, whatever. That's the war wagon in my mind. But this is the kind of stuff that, he dealt with all the time. Again, we see him from, his editorial page. And I tell you, that is a tough thing to do, is to write an editorial every month, month after month, year after year for 18 years to do that. That's not the easiest thing to do, because you're always trying to come up with new ideas about new things. And yet he was able to do it. We know that he went back into history, used sort of a philosophical approach in a lot of cases to discussing important issues and things. So, but again, I think the thing for me about Bobby is I've never met anyone who is as energized as he was all the time, right? All the time. So, we are going to miss him very much. And he was, again, as you all know, he was literally working right up to the last moment there. We were editing February, when he passed and things. So he's, like I said, he was just the Energizer bunny in a firefighter suit, and just a tremendous loss for all of us. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Glenn. Jack Murphy. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon, guys. Well, Bob, just, as you can see here, just listening to the people we have here, there's probably a line that could extend across the United States waiting to talk about the impact of 30,000 firefighters on a given year, and him spreading that knowledge out through 30,000 disciples. All right, it is a tribute to him. I first met Bob in '96 when I was the educational coordinator for the FDIC. You come in for your badges at the speaker ready room, and I was manning the table at the time. He walks in with Ted Nee, another Albuquerque chief. Ted's my height. Everybody don't know me. I'm only 5'6". So they come in, and he says, all I hear is Ted Nee and Bob Halton. I look up and I said, oh, it's Ted and Ned. So Ned stuck with Bob every time Bob would go off the rail on me once in a while, very rarely, but I say Ned, and I just pull him back in. His thing was just working it, just working the show. He knew how to work it. He was a showman. No doubt in mind with that. However, a showman does get stopped. All right, we're trying to go one day from the convention center to Lucas Hall. Well, there's a security guard at the end there. He's checking badges. Bob don't have a badge. So I said, Bob, I gave you a badge. What do you do with it? I leave it back at the desk. I had my badge, which I was proud of that year because he gave it to me. On the badge, it said tall man and small body. That was my badge. So, and the humor that goes with that with him. Things I talk about, him trying to get him down the hall. Oh gosh, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. A tough one, but a good one. And I said, Bob, here's our thing. I guess my thing with him is like we respected one another so much. No matter what we had to do to get accomplished, we would just do it, and everything went quietly behind the scenes. I do remember 1 or 2 years there. Just can we get him up on stage? But once he got up there, his whole demeanor changed. I could barely get him up the backstage. We eventually put a lift in, and he didn't want to take that. But he'd go out there. Wow, man, he just turned to a different person, like everybody said. But he'd come back in, he'd be drained as anything. But go back, get changed, and we walk the walk. Go walk the place. We got there 1 year early, and we go into the hall, and they had a golf cart that they ride around, but the golf cart had a flatbed on it, a little thing. I said, Bob, get up there. What do you want up there for? I said, just do me a favor, pontificate, put your hands up like the Pope. I said, I need this to get you down the halls. And we had a good laugh over that. Hot walks, what I call the hot walks, the gauntlet run. For hot classes, for everybody for the buses. We start way down at the end of the JW, and just to get down the hall, he would work that hallway all the way down, stop, speak to everybody, like a lot of guys said, little things. Oh, he'll write a foreword for your book, things like that, very personable. The thing was that then he'd go outside and make sure everybody got on the bus. It just many things that I could think of that he just made everything so perfect. To me, I'm sorry, gentlemen, we have a lot of bright people. He was the most brilliant person I've met in the fire service. So well read beyond everything. His love for military and country were outrageous, and of God, and his family, the 3 kids and Marsha. He lit up my life.
He lit all of us up, Jack, and as far as he also lifted us all up. He made my career and me such a better person, as well as everybody on this show.
Yeah.
I know today's hard for you because you were very close, and I really appreciate you diving into your emotions a little bit and talking a little bit about him. I know it's not easy for you, but thank you.
Thank you. And everybody, thank you. And just keep up the spirit with him. Like he would say, education and training is the most powerful weapon to change the fire service. And let's just honor him that way by doing it all the time. Thank you, guys.
Couldn't agree with you more. Captain Dugan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, PJ. I appreciate it. Bobby Halton was one of my best friends. I'm going to get emotional talking about this, but we talked at least twice a week, every week. We read books together. Oh, I just read this. I just read this. I just picked this up. This was in my basement. This was going to be his Christmas gift. Okay. It is For God and Country. It's about a World War II priest taken prisoner of war at the Battle of Bulge. And I told him, because that was one of his favorite lines, For God and Country. And I found this book and I picked it up and I was reading it. I was like, oh my God, Bobby would love this book about them holding mass, communion, and everything else. Bobby and I loved to read. And one of the things he's sitting up in heaven laughing about is he turned me on to a book about a year and a half ago. I just met this author, Mike, and he wrote this book called Threads of the West. It's going to be a series. And I go, okay, I get the first one and I read it. And it's a fun read. It kind of reminds me of like Louis L'Amour or Lonesome Dove with McMurtry, something like that. Great read. Then I read after I'm hooked on this book and I love the characters. Guy's planning a 31 book series. I'm like, Halton, you are kidding me. Are you not kidding me? 31 books? You don't think I have enough to do? They're fun reads, Mike. You read those on the airplane. My favorite Halton story is at the Fools Convention in Rogers, Arkansas, 2010 maybe. Somebody dropped out because of a family emergency. And we went to the hotel room and on a pad like this, 5 pages, put together a class called American Command. We taught American Command, and when we were teaching, we were supposed to talk for 2 hours on leadership. Guy was coming on after us, said, you guys aren't stopping. This is amazing. Let's continue going. And we did it for 3 hours. We did it for 4 hours. And then we ended up coming up with this class together. Bobby Halton was just the essential fireman. He was the everyman fireman. Everybody could relate to him. Everybody could love him. He was just that kind of guy. And he was my dear friend. And the other thing he and I connected over was family. One of Bobby's sisters, I walked my dog past her house. Another one, his sister, Elizabeth, Beth, I call her, lives down the road from me with his brother Raymond. And Bobby used to call me all the time. Hey, Mike, I know you had a bad storm. I can't get Beth. I can't get Bernadette. I can't get Mary on the phone. Can you help me out? Yeah, I'll take a ride by the house. I remember going knocking on Beth's door. And she goes, Michael, what are you doing here? And I said, Bobby couldn't get in touch with you. Oh, I just spoke to him. We're all good. Oh, okay. Come on in for a cup of coffee. I used to see his mother there. And you think Bobby Halton was a reader. Bobby's mom had stacks of books that were, what's up next, Mrs. Halton? What are you reading? What's good? And I just loved it. When Mrs. Halton, Bobby's mom, was in her final stages of her life, Bobby used to call me. Hey, Mike, I need help getting my mom out of the house. And she trusts you. Will you come over? Always. Of course I will. Okay. But we connected. Our love for family, our love for the fire service, our faith, forged our friendship. Okay. And our love for this country and all of those things. The fire service is less because Bobby's gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Cap. I really appreciate, and a few of the things that stuck out to me today, I just took a couple notes. Is one thing that was said was, FDIC this year is going to feel so empty, even with 30,000 people there. But I think it's important for all of us to remember, and everybody listening today and those that will listen to this, is Bobby lives in every one of those 30,000 firefighters and more, because he's touched every one of them. Friendship and respect. The last opportunity that I had to be with Chief Halton this fall, we're out in Utah, and one of the very few trips that my wife traveled with me. And we were sitting outside the hotel. It was a beautiful fall afternoon, having a drink. And Bobby comes walking up. My wife has never had the opportunity to meet him. So I made sure that she knew who it was coming in. She goes, I recognize him from all the videos and everything. And he sat down, and not once in over an hour did we discuss the fire service. We discussed family. We discussed current politics. We just talked about relationships. When he got up and left, my wife looked at me and goes, I've never felt like I've known somebody more in such a short time in my life. He's incredible. And that's what we all feel. And that's what all those 30,000 firefighters feel, is just that, if, like I said in the beginning, if you knew Bobby, if you've met Bobby, you are friends of Bobby. He may not always have liked everybody, but you're a friend of Bobby, right? And he lives in each and every one of us. So for everybody that joined us today, I really appreciate, I know this was extremely hard for all of you. For those of you that weren't able to join us today, thank you for trying. It was important to all of us. And I know it was important for you to try to be here, but this short notice, I know it was difficult for everybody. I'm going to turn this segment back over to Frank to kind of tie this up and close this this amazing, but sad, but also uplifting show at the same time out. Thanks, everybody.
This is a tough week. Bobby was more than just a friend and a mentor. And what I think is important when you look at Facebook and you look at all the social media, everybody's in a picture with Bobby because he touched so many people's lives. And he took the time to build everybody and mentor everybody. And, Bobby and I both loved history. We love politics. And, FDIC isn't going to be empty because of all the people that he touched. That's going to be there to carry on the mission. And FDIC is the place to go get a mentor, and you don't have to know somebody to have them mentor you. Bobby had a shared purpose. I was reading his editorials before I ever met him. And when I testified before Congress and the AP was going through my trash, literally, Bobby and Glenn Corbett were the first ones to come to my defense and stand up for my integrity. Bobby was the guy I called with my testimony before Congress to read through and talk about pivots for press things, but he was always interested in building everybody else. Just a couple of weeks ago, he texted me and said, I woke up Marcia to make coffee to watch you on Newsmax this morning. And I'm like, what? Who does that? He was always building other people. And one quick story, because I was able to give Bobby a gift, which, he did so much for me. I was so happy that I was able to give something to him. So we were talking one day, and Bobby used to use the Ford technique. He used to talk about family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. That's what Bobby did. If you listen to him when he was, that's why people felt so connected to him, is he found a way to connect to them without ever sacrificing himself. And so I used it on him one day. And he goes, well, one of the things I'd like to do is I'd like to go to the Catholic prayer breakfast, the national prayer breakfast in DC. And, one day I'd like to meet my mentor, who I never met. And I'm like, Bobby Halton has a mentor? That's not even, I couldn't even fathom that. It's like, never meet your hero because you're going to be disappointed. Well, I wasn't disappointed with Bobby. And I said, who is your mentor? And he goes, well, Charles Krauthammer is who I emulate when I write my editorial each month. The way I structure my editorial is taken directly from Charles Krauthammer's writing. And I'm like, well, let's go to DC. We're going to Catholic Prayer Breakfast and we're going to go meet Charles Krauthammer. So it was just a magical weekend with me, Bobby, and my son. He walks into Fox News and he's talking to Oliver North. And I was like, oh, he's in his element. And then he goes up to Charles Krauthammer, who has since passed, but Charles was in a wheelchair. Most people who watched him on Fox News never even realized he was in a wheelchair until the very end. And it was the first time, because Bobby was a showman, that I saw Bobby humbled. Bobby was talking to Charles and he goes, I'm just the editor. He said, I'm just the editor of fire engineering. And he said, our circulation, direct circulation's around 50,000. And I was like really got into Bobby's head for a second. And Charles Krauthammer gave him such grace and was like, Bobby, I write for Human Events, Reagan's favorite paper. Our circulation is 50,000. And then Charles just started talking to him about fire engineering, bringing 35,000 people to FDIC. And you just saw him light up like he was. And this was, as Jack was talking, there were some tough years. This was during one of those really, really tough years for Bobby. And he just lit up, and it was just a great night in DC. And my son loves him. And, just watching him talk to Charles and talk to Oliver North about his son in the military and everything else. It was a highlight that I was able to give something to him, somebody who gave me so much. Our last person for today is on for the vaccine mandate. We're sorry we missed you, but Bobby, was very impressed by you, without a doubt. And I know you got a book coming out, but if you want to say a few words and we'll end the show.
Hey, thanks, Frank, and everyone else you put on the show. I don't want to take up more of your time. I will say that I talked to Bobby and had the good fortune to make friends with him and talk to him on a pretty frequent basis. Actually, his last correspondence with me was like less than 12 hours before he passed. So I was wishing him a Merry Christmas. He was wishing us a Happy Hanukkah. And yeah, it stinks because it was so sudden. And like everybody said, he's going to leave a hole in everybody's lives and hearts. But I think somebody mentioned it. I don't think he would have it any other way. Bobby loved to prepare. And I'm sure he took those few days before Christmas preparing for that special time that he probably looked forward to. And I don't think he would have wanted to die at any other time of the year. That I feel like that's the way he would have wanted it, to go up and prepare and have that special moment in his passing. So rest in peace, Bobby. Thank you so much for your friendship and mentorship. And we'll all see you soon.
All right, I will give the last word to Dave Rhodes to take us off. That's it for Politics and Tactics today. Again, go to Nathan Lloyd and the Thomas More Society's website. Reach out to Chad if you need some legal advice. I'll throw it up on Twitter today as well. And we really thank our two new lawyer friends for coming on. Hopefully you'll come back on in a future show and give us an update on the case. We'll give you the full hour at that, and we appreciate your patience given the situation that we're in. Chief Rhodes, take us off.
Yeah, thank you guys. An excellent show where we weren't afraid to talk about some tough issues. Couple of days, actually, last week, I got to go to the Indianapolis Fire Department Training Center's dedication. First time they've had a training center in 42 years. Bobby was supposed to be with me. They left a chair empty for him, sitting right there. And the mayor, Mr. Hogseth from Indiana, got up to speak, kind of do a little welcoming address. And I just thought it would be perfect to close us out, because I think he summed up something that all of us could say today. And he started his presentation out with, "Today, for the first time, I am sorry that I don't have to speak after Bobby Halton." So take that with you. Thanks for having me, PJ and Richie.